Celeste's mom's gonna come up and talk a little bit later, so she'll have that mic. Okay. All right, we got a little 45 minutes for some hopefully inspiring stories for you guys. So, I was able to share at Durango last October, and it was really great to share some of the story, but we got a lot of new faces this morning, so I'll kind of just explain a little bit about the background of the work and just hopefully how it can maybe inspire a little moment of your craft as well. I've worked as a hospice nurse for a number of years and songwrote at the same time. And I didn't study grammar though. And I came to find that, in those environments where people, just normal people, are suffering or there's a pain that's present, music and creativity can be incredibly healing. And, just personally, it's a gift that I tend to take for granted. And it's just always there, and I always have it available, and it's just such a wonderful gift. But, to turn it into something for someone else as a reflection of them that can then connect them to a bigger picture has been really powerful. So I'm going to share some more specifics of that story today. And it's like a little three-parter for you. And I decided to kind of title this talk, Songs That Heal the Wound. And it's interesting how you start something and one thing leads to another, and then it comes right back home and ends up healing you and your own story, which is kind of poetic in itself, right? But the first little chapter I'll explain has to do with an old man that I met when I was working in hospice in San Diego. And his name was Bob, and he was a World War II veteran. And he was one of the most upbeat guys I've ever seen for working in a hospice house. He was always like super bright and just willing to whip up a cup of coffee or just have a conversation. And I worked with him in that living room while I tended to the patients, and he was always very present. And later down the line, I left that hospice and went traveling again and kind of came back to San Diego eventually, and then I introduced the songwriting to that hospice that I started with, and I'm like, I'd love to work with you guys, and just put me with anybody. And they're like, oh, you gotta sit with Bob. And so I got to sit with Bob, and his story ended up leading to so many other things that he is not aware of because he's no longer with us. But it just speaks to, you never know that whatever you share could have this ripple effect that is just completely out of your control. And so he was in World War II, and he was on the shores, and he was with his buddies during the war, and they were in the battle, and they were, I think, it was like this little island. He said it was shaped like a crooked carrot, and he got hit by some shrapnel by a grenade, and it took out one of his eyes, and so he was left without an eye, and they had to send him back on the ship. And so a bunch of the guys got injured, and so when he was on the ship heading back to Pearl Harbor, this brilliant physician that was on that ship paired 9 boys that lost an eye with 9 other boys that were totally blind. And they had to be the eye of that soldier for the whole trip back. And so I helped him dress, helped him eat. He had to pretty much do everything to assist his comrade. But he said that service, that element of being able to give, even though being damaged or injured, gave him perspective. And he said, there's not a single day he looks in the mirror and feels sorry for himself because he got a taste of, the other side of how bad it could be. And he was able to taste some of the pain. He was halfway there, and so he was able to serve with that much more compassion. And so, later down the line, I come to find that, he served in hospice because of the loss of his wife, and he, had this long, wonderful marriage with this woman, and then she passed away, and he remembered the lesson of on the ship and serving with this one eye, and he said, I just got to go to the source of the pain. And he went to hospice and gave with his whole heart for years. And then at the time where I was interviewing him for this song, he himself was on hospice. volunteering for hospice. And I'm just like, it doesn't get any more loving than that and connected than that. But yeah, it was a song called Eye of the Soldier came from it, and I'll share it with you now. And then share what the song led to in the next step. Sounds pretty in tune. When they sent us to their crooked hill, in the days of kill or surely be killed, those grenades had come to steal our joy. Each had lost an eyes, 9 young boys. Back aboard the ship we sailed to the harbor of the Pearl. What we lost was worth the cost to change our world. Brothers of the night opened up our eyes to our new order. We didn't have the time to worry about our hide, 'cause we still had the eye of a soldier. Come on, dog. If we didn't have the chance to help, we would still be just as blind ourselves. We sailed to the harbor of the Pearl. What we lost is worth the cost to change our world. Living with the blind, brothers of the night, opened up our eyes to our new orders. We didn't have the time to worry about our hide, but we still have the eye of a soldier. And brings Bob back a little bit every time. And it was very interesting because back then, they didn't have legitimate programs necessarily like we do today to facilitate healing for PTSD and all those wounds, they just were like, get back to work, go home. And so luckily, Bob had a leg up because he found the gift in service. And so I was able to share that song with the hospice after it was written, after Bob had passed, actually. And he passed during COVID. And the doors closed on his little facility, and he's like, you know what? If I ain't giving, I ain't living. And so that was it. At 90-something years old, he was, I think he was close to 100. But then I was able to sing his song for a remembrance event through the hospice, and there was a representative from the VA who is a therapist that was looking for alternatives for their programs, and she's just like, songwriting? Yeah, let's do this thing. And I'm like, okay, great. And so I teamed up with her to start working through the VA as kind of like the umbrella, and we were able to sit with a number of patients through COVID, actually, and it was pretty wonderful to kind of have them on the inside because, everything was pretty locked down, as we remember. And then I was speaking with her one day, and she's like, I kind of want to try something new. There's a couple of people that are on our client list that have suffered a different kind of loss. They're not on hospice, but they've suffered tremendous loss. And I don't know if you want to maybe try a different branch of this service. And I was like, yeah, of course. And we started this group that we now call the Legacy Group, and it's been active for about 3 years now. And it all started with that little song kind of opening the door for these people that we help now. And it's applying that same principle, and it's something we didn't even really realize until a little later on. But it started with two women who didn't know each other before the group, and they each had lost a son to suicide. And it was just this brutal pain that they came to us with. And they didn't really know where to go with it. It was just, what do you do with the loss of a child in those circumstances? And yet they had a sense of hope, and they had heard the song, and they said, we know that there's a song coming, and there's something expressed coming. And they said that this was a little different than previous grief therapy because, in therapy you typically sit and you talk and, you're able to speak, but not anything is necessarily physically created from that. And that element alone was what was like this beacon for them. And, for those that don't write songs, music's pretty darn magical, it's like, how do you do it? If I'm gonna have a song, it's just this wonderful wonder about it. And with that, it was pretty fascinating how through the course of that time, we did dive into some incredibly dark waters, the honesty of true pain. But through that pain, they were able to come to terms with the potential of what there was to learn with compassion, and potentially how that would teach them to then serve another. And what that would lead to for bringing more people into the group and more songs to be written, and for them to have healed a bit and kind of heal as they help. And I think that's been a really key element, is like they're not waiting until they're perfect. They're helping as they're damaged. And I think that's something we all can relate to. And so with that, the song came called Follow Phoenix, and it's one that actually was released yesterday, where after several years, we had all these songs, and I was able to team up with a team of music label guys, and one of the members is here with us today from Hawaii, and it's a label called Beautiful Emergence, and I thought they were just perfect for the songs and the theme, because through it all, beauty does emerge from pain if you allow it to, and it does, let that hidden world become realized, and you can see into people like you didn't before if you've suffered, because you've been there. And with that, there's this call to action. That's where this woman that inspired the song Follow Phoenix, it was this desire to serve even though there was this destruction. And in many ways, she saw her son that she lost in a similar way. He was damaged from the war, and he wasn't the same liberated version of himself that he used to be, and so he chose to liberate himself in that regard, and it was terribly painful, but she does hold to a hope that, this little physical body is very temporary, and there is this spirit within us that can fly and soar when the time is right. And so with that, Fall of Phoenix is kind of this symbol of how from those ashes you can become alive again. And many times in these cases, it's because of those ashes you face, you face new life because of the destruction. And it's this cyclic season. It's like the winter before the spring. And so with that, I'll sing Janine's song for you. And what's nice is that they know that this is happening today, and they feel like every time their song is shared and their story is shared, like there's more meaning created. So thank you guys for bearing witness to them today as well. Of course, all these songs are kind of high in the register for first thing in the morning, so thanks for being forgiving and pitchy. Whisper, wake from your sleeping. Desert, begging for rain. Feathers, folded and flaking. Firebird, calling your name. Never, talons in chains, untethered, not long for the keeping. Free bird, flying to Spain. Follow Phoenix, lanterns of light. Sharing secret worlds in the sky. Strike all the matches, wings open wide. Up from the ashes, forever alive. Janine and her son Daniel. And since that song, there was a number of people that came, and there was spouses that had lost there were people that had lost their spouses, there were people that had lost their parents, and people that had lost their siblings as well. And so like it just kept bringing in more people who all could connect, although their loss wasn't the same, they could still connect that there was a sense of loss and a need to create something new, in honor of them and that legacy. And so in July of last year, we had about a dozen or so people that were in the group currently, and we were there for a family vacation, and my grandfather was a veteran, and he had sadly committed suicide when my mom was very young, and he just suffered so much and withdrew. He didn't have the call to go outward for whatever reason, and maybe didn't have the tools to be led to give and to heal. And so with that, my family had started to do more research on the actual story of their father, and come to find that he was a very noble man, and he was known as the head of the spear in his division, and he was the one that paved the new roads for the team to go in. They were the first in foreign land. And when I heard that, then, this little sparkle started coming, and I'm like, oh my, that's an analogy. And then the members of the group, of the legacy group, they're like, well, why doesn't your mom become a part of the group? And I was like, well, I guess you're right. Like, sometimes it's so close to home that we don't realize it. That's just such a lesson to learn, that you're always looking outward, and there's all this grandeur and all these plans and all these things that you want to do with what you believe you can give to the world, and then you come to find that there's so much opportunity right in front of you and with everybody in your life. And so with that, my mom was able to join the group, and it was very special, and she's going to share a bit of her story with you today as well before we share her song, just so it's who better to share than the source. So come on up. Give it up for Mama McCartor, the head of the spear.
Good morning. Morning. Thank you all for getting up and being here. I know it's not easy, all these late nights. But
That's what we signed up for, right?
yeah, that's what we signed up for. But I just love music, and it's been so wonderful to have raised a music lover, and to take his talents to a place where I hadn't heard of before, legacy music, writing about other people's lives, and not just their suffering, but the celebration of life after. Like every life needs to be celebrated, however the outcome. And so I think it's so great to be here. There's so much talent under one roof. There's so many opportunities that are, untouched. I mean, they're just, and this is one of those little ones that's kind of like a little beacon for me. It's been wonderful to see this, as Ian started with a songwriter, and have it develop from the hospice nursing to actually write legacy music. So Ian kind of touched base on a few things already that I had, had taken notes about. But this type of music it's such a privilege to talk about, such a powerful form of songwriting, and especially to you guys, because between collabs and just the opportunity you never know who'll come into your life that you can actually make a huge difference to not just that person, but to their families. It just ripples out, like sadness ripples out, happiness ripples out from this type of thing, I think. And so I'm up here to share the song about my dad, and about being a part of this legacy group that I joined with to share my, Ian's grandfather's story. My dad fought in the Korean War in the 1950s, and he was 21 years old. He served in the Army division called the Head of the Spear. They were the engineers that were responsible for carving out the roads for the troops and tanks to follow. It was extremely dangerous, and most never expected to ever come back home. One day, as the soldiers were cutting through the brush, someone decided they needed some cold beers, so they drew straws to see who would go into town. My dad drew the short straw, but when he returned from town, his platoon had been taken out by snipers. He would never overcome the survivor's guilt. We didn't find out, like Ian alluded to, about a lot of the information about my dad until last summer, and we discovered some of Dad's Army paperwork down in my mom's basement. We reached out to a few of his friends that were still around. He would be in his 90s now. And they shared some pretty incredible stories about my dad. You know, it's, I really can't imagine what it was like to be a soldier in the Korean War, carving through jungles, you know, being the first one out there and not knowing what to expect down this road. So we heard some really neat stories that kind of brought, you know, us to just more of a knowledge of really maybe, you know, really how difficult those years had been for him, and definitely after. And we also did a little internet sleuthing. You know, we kind of got on, we wanted to find out more information about, you know, just what our dad did. He had 3 bronze medals and all kinds of patches and cool little memorial things for us to hang on to. My mom made us dog tags, so they're really precious. Anyway, since last July, I've been a part of the VA of La Jolla Legacy Group, and there's about 10 of us, and we're like family. We meet and we are able to speak freely and share our stories and really heal through a lot of, you know, our grief. Where my story is just a little bit different. My dad passed away over 50 years ago, and so most of their stories are a lot more recent. But like Enid said, I was about 8 years old when my dad passed away, committed suicide. And it was like he just disappeared. He wasn't forgotten. We just didn't talk about it or anything that had happened. He was just absent from our lives. So it was kind of like, it reminded me when Jonathan was sharing his song about his friend Winston yesterday. It took him 20 years to kind of get to a point where he could grieve and share that story. And it's true, I mean, grieving doesn't have a timeline. We can, you know, depending on how we grieve or if we can find that closure, it's a little bit different, but sometimes it takes a long time, and it takes the right people to come into your lives for you to open up and to really give you the opportunity. It's hard to explain these long-shelved emotions, but time goes on and you fill those voids with other things. And when the time's right, it happens. My time spent with the VA of La Jolla Group has helped me understand more of what my dad dealt with as a soldier. In the 50s, there just, like Ian alluded to, there just wasn't the resources. There wasn't the knowledge there is now about PTSD and just those feelings of hopelessness. And our meetings are a safe place, and we just share precious memories and shoulder sorrows and really help bring that important closure. Ian's legacy song for his grandpa really brings things full circle for me. The Head of the Spear is not only a story about my dad, but it's an anthem song for all who have fears and unsolved answers about their loved ones, who have suffered suicide, brain tumor, traumas, and other war damage. Some of the special lyrics I pull out of that song are, "We can build from what we break, and relax back on all those hands." It takes courage to open up about sad things, and it's a beautiful thing to have friends to help you do it. another line that he wrote is, "The head of the spear is heaving a hoe into the great unknown." And, you know, that's us all working together. That's doing that. That's reaching out to each other. And they don't have to be war veterans. You know, they can be, you know, just songs of great healing and can bring such encouragement. And I think this songwriting opportunity, you know, it has such purpose. And every life should be celebrated. Thanks, Ian, for asking me to talk. And thanks for listening to me.
Yeah, I mean, what a gift to help my mama. Yeah, and I just wanted to bring her up here to kind of illustrate how it's in everybody's life in some way. You know, there's always someone next door or an old friend or a family member that needs some help. And we're artists. You know, we create and we transform. And I think that's a really relevant thing these days. You know, it's so intimate and it's so connected. And I think a lot of people struggle with feeling that disconnection and, you know, the rift that's been caused by modern times and technology as well. You know, things have gotten a little colder in some ways. And so I hope today is that this little chat is maybe giving you some ideas. And if you have any questions at all, I'm an open book, and I'd love to help structure anything or give you any ideas or just any steps that can assist you in your journey, because there's lots to do. So this is the head of the spear. We've got the orders to cross a border, to build a road through a foreign land. And there's a lot of brush that grew. There's engineering to persevering, because it might take 50 years. But we've got to see it through. 'Cause if we try to carry on alone, we will surely lose against the stone. But everyone here is close to the clear. The head of the spear is heaving a hoe into the great unknown. A lack of vision or indecision, one straw's all it takes. A tax that snapped the shaft in half. Pick up the pieces, come to Jesus, 'cause we can build from what we break. Relax on back in all those hands. 'Cause if we try to carry on alone, we will surely lose against the stone. But everyone here is close to the clear. The head of the spear is heaving a hoe into the great unknown. If we try to carry on alone, we will surely lose against the stone. But everyone here is close to the clear. The head of the spear is heaving a hoe into the great unknown. So Grandma. Well, thank you guys. You know, I think that kind of illustrates a common point. So, if anybody has any questions, we've got like 15 minutes, 10 minutes. Totally open. Yes?
I'm really curious to understand how you facilitated the songwriting part of it. Like, do you need to open up just like your process?
Yeah. Well, she's curious as how the songwriting process was actually facilitated to get people to open up, and really that's a great question because there's a lot of trust that needs to happen. And you know, it's not for everybody at every time. You know, it's like Mom needed 50 years to process enough to come to a point of trust. And so, physically, what we do, it's me, the songwriter, and I have a clinical background as a nurse, so I kind of pretty sensitive to a lot of those elements that nursing kind of showed me at the bedside. But we have a therapist, which is a wonderful help, and I didn't have a therapist helping me for years. And it's nice to be able to sit back creatively and listen. And then the therapist is the pro, and they can direct all the tension and all the grief and all the heaviness that can come out, and they just know what to ask. And so it's been a blessing to have Heather, our dear therapist at the VA, and a chaplain as well. And so there's a nice spiritual component to having a chaplain there because, they tend to be more universal or general, and we come across many people with many different faiths, and it's nice to have a good kind of basis of respect for whatever they need to process and whatever system, would serve them best. And so it's great to have a team. And so the team is essential. It's really become what the group has become. There are peer facilitators now. And so I would say, in regards to your question, getting people to open up and getting people to trust that there's hope and there's a reason to share specifically, and that it's not just a dead end, or it's not just going to be a downer or a hole that they can't get out of, because I think with such trauma and grief, those are foreign lands to navigate through, and you need support. And so with that, the peer support has been the key, and they've led the way, and in that they get to heal by leading as well. And so I can tell them, yeah, we're writing a song, trust me, it's going to be great, but whatever, to hear it from someone who's just gone through it and has been victorious recently is really powerful. And so to keep people in that circle so that they can be available for that testimony has been the key to help people open up right away. I mean, it's that compassion. It's real compassion, and it's deep. And the second people come into the group, they just feel it, and they're like, I've waited for this. And once you cultivate something like that, like a trust and like this intention that is so pure, it's so tangible. And so I think that's just a call to the craft, really align yourself with who you are and, what you have to give. And, there's that mystical quality to it. It's beyond words. Yeah. Any other questions? You in the back, my friend.
Do you have conversations about what could be included in a song, and what should not be included, like things that are off limits for you to talk about, or is that or could you just speak to that?
Yeah, like boundaries, I guess you could say, or like guidelines. Not really. Anything goes. That's kind of the beautiful thing about this, is like they have the permission to be completely open. And as dark as it gets, as weird as it may feel to be so open, they feel totally safe. And then, to me, as the songwriter, it's kind of my duty to take those things that are so grim or so painful and turn it into poetry. While not forsaking the pain, they aren't just positive songs of like everything's grand and don't worry about a thing, but like how to take the pain that they share, represent it to where they can relate to it when they hear the song and they're like, that's me. And then make it accessible for others as well. I think keeping it poetically universal in some ways is something we're familiar with in sync, I guess. And it's a principle that applies to this because it's the art of being able to embody them, but allowing that to connect them and for other people to hear it and be like, that's me too. So it is a good creative challenge. I'll tell you, like, doing this work as an artist has challenged me beyond anything I've ever had to do. I mean, it's been a wonderful bolster for the craft, and I mean, a true honor to be pushed like this. But any other questions?
How do you stumble on the titles of the songs are just unreal to me. How do you stumble into the title from hearing people's stories?
They always come from them.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it. They spill all this stuff and they're like, oh, this probably isn't anything. This probably doesn't make sense. And they're always discounting themselves. And that's a rule in the group, actually. There's a rule. There's no apologies. You know, it's like, do not apologize for who you are. And don't be like, oh, this probably doesn't make sense, because it probably does. And, you know, that permission has been really powerful. And then the stuff that comes out, I mean, as an artist, you hear it and you're like, oh my God, that's beautiful. You know, like everything, every lyric in these songs has to do with something that they shared. And then for, you know, the task of putting it together and making a song of it that is cohesive and it has all the elements that, you know, we're trained to do as songwriters. And to turn it back around and for them to be like, those aren't my exact words, but that is absolutely me. You know, they feel themselves transformed in a way. It's like a different mirror. And yeah, it's exciting. Like every time we have a session, I'm like, what am I gonna hear? You know, it's such a thrill, creatively. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like self-care as it relates to you, the creator? And you know, I would imagine that your nursing background comes into play a lot here, but like as songwriters, we all have, I think, an empathetic bone in our body, and we all kind of write from an internal place. But what you're doing is really different. Like you're taking on other people's experiences and pain, and that can be a lot. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, his question was self-care. You know, how, as the writer, that maybe would take on the burden. That's a very good question, actually. And I'd say the self-cares for me come from the work. It comes from the lessons learned. You know, it's that movement that music is. You know, that it doesn't stay in here. And I think that's how I survived hospice nursing too. It was just like day after day seeing death and the utmost of suffering. But there's hope in creativity. You know, there's creation, there's new life. And a song lives forever. You know, that's what makes this group so special. It's, you know, we're budding something that with technology today, it's like that becomes an eternal symbol. As long as it's on the internet, you know, it exists. And that's pretty mind-boggling to think, like 100 years from now, it's still floating out there, streaming or whatever, you know, it's still getting plays and touching people around the world. And actually that is part of like the healing of it, is knowing that that's kind of a release, you know, and it's like this taking something that, holy smokes. I literally thought that was like the sun popping up. I'm like, it's the end of the world, folks. Thank you. But I think that the self-care aspect comes from creating and releasing and not letting it swell too deeply for too long. You know, there is a surrender of, you know, I need to do the best I can with this, express it, and move along to something new. And what's to learn from it? You know, it is incredibly painful stuff, but the wisdom there has taught me all the things I know, you know, and it's that heals the pain as well, and it alleviates the burden, because the burden then makes sense. You know, it's not just a dead weight, but it's a moving weight at that point. And it's a shared weight, you know. That's, I think, the whole poetry of the group itself, you know, the community. That's why things like this are so beautiful. It's the shared journey. Mm-hmm. And it's heavy, but you're not the only hands holding up that stone. And then Yeah, and that's something to share as well. It's interesting just from an artist's point of view and releasing songs like this. You know, it's to the people that were releasing their songs to be like, your music's being played in Argentina, and it's thousands of people are streaming it right now. And like, you show them a picture of what 1,000 people in a room looks like, and it's magic. They're just like, I can't believe that so many people are connecting to this. And that puts a whole new word on release to me, like a song release. You know, it's the release date. It's literally a release for them. And that's been wonderful. We started in January, and the second release was yesterday, and it's just incredible. They're just so excited and they're hopeful, and you know, that's the gift that we have with technology today. We just plug it into DistroKid and off it goes, and it's easy for us, but to them they're like, God, I can't believe it. Like, the world has access to this now. Yeah, we're blessed, folks. We are. Any other questions? We have a few more minutes. I'll try to see hands with the sun in my eyes now. Ladies first. Patricia.
I'm curious about what sort of questions you or the therapist ask to get people to start revealing. Like, you know, it's not a deposition or anything. It's like, you know, just what are they? Can you give us some examples of sort of the prompts that you might use to help someone start sharing their story?
Yeah. I think when people come to the group, they're primed to share because the intention of the group's so specific that people who don't want to share just don't. They're not interested. But the people that are like, I've been waiting for something like this, they're eager. And so it's interesting. It's like the you build it and they'll come type of thing. But the way that we try to structure the group is, you know, of course the pain's addressed and the loss is addressed. But it's an opportunity for them to introduce that loved one to us and to let them live on with the stories. And they tell us all these wonderful stories about life and love and, you know, the fun things and not just the tragedy. You know, that's something that they shared, is that after a loss, there's so much focus on the loss, especially with suicide. That's always the thing. That's always the element, the elephant in the room, and there's always that heaviness. And an opportunity like this to celebrate the life before that moment, and to revisit all these photographs and favorite songs, and you know, all these key memories and these things that they really miss, and the questions that they may still have, and to simply witness them, not try to answer them per se, but to explore them safely. And that question can be carried forward in a song, and for it to be, you know, alive as a question, you know, and a common question for many, I think. You know, just the more that we've been going through the year, even suicide's been just a close beast with our own family even, and it's humbling because you never know what's going on beneath the surface with anybody. But to provide love and an opportunity to connect is, I think, one of the best things we can do. Be a haven. Did I see a hand to my left through the sun? No? Okay, yes.
Do you feel any additional responsibility when you release these songs that are about these really delicate stories? You know what I mean?
Yeah, she asked if there was a different responsibility with these new releasings and the new songs that are shared, and I'd say absolutely. You know, it's like, it's a mission now. You know, it's not just me writing about a breakup that I had, you know, which is valid, but like for that personal experience to be shared, that's one thing, but to be like the holder of this, like the bearer or ambassador of these things it's a really different perspective when I'm sharing. And it gives me more meaning. You know, I connect with the songs too, you know, I find myself in there, but you know, knowing that you're holding a torch for somebody else, it brings a sense of honor, I guess you could say, or like a sense of purpose that I never knew before. Yeah. Anybody else? Thanks for the questions, guys. We got about 5 more minutes.
Where can we find you?
Oh, my mom has a question. I'll get to that. Yes, Mr. Klein.
Yeah, so these songs are great. I think a lot of us have flights tomorrow. They're going to be long flights. Get on Spotify, download it, listen to it on the flight. But my question is, I mean, I know these songs are going to impact people, but do you ever have an experience where the family doesn't like it? And if you do, how do you move forward after that?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, that's always a hesitation just with the ego, you know, and to be like, gosh, I hope they like this song, and you never know because people have different tastes. And I've never had a situation where somebody says, I don't like that, or that's not me. But I find that the more involved they are in the sharing, the more that they feel that they're witnessed, the more powerful the song. I've written for people who just are with me for one interview, or they write me a letter or something, and then I share the song and I just hear great in an email back. I'm like, huh, okay. But it's a dance, you know, it's like the more you give, the more you get. And for these people, for example, who I've been working with, the first members of this group for 3 years, we meet every week for 3 years. Their songs mean the world to them because they've given the world to the song, essentially. And so, yeah, that's kind of a call to action for me to be like, how can I involve that person and not just be like, thanks, I'm writing a song now. You know, to be like inviting them on every step and showing them, you know, the drafts and, you know, the whole process and involving them in the creation of it. You know, I think that breathes life into it in a different context. So, yes, Sarah.
How do you, is there ever a conversation about, like, if these songs, like, take off, or if there's, like, money involved?
Yeah, actually, that's been addressed within the group, and, you know, they're like, well, what if it becomes a hit? And I'm like, well, that'd be great. I'm not counting on any of that, but, you know, it's nice to have the rights specified to the artist, and so it's like a song I've written inspired by them, and then that way there's no tangles financially. But with everybody I work with, I want to introduce an opportunity for them to like select a charity of some kind or something that would be meaningful for their loved one, or some kind of trust or something, and then delegate a percentage of whatever proceeds come. Yeah, and so that way they can kind of carry that legacy forward as well. Yeah, because you never know. Last question, Priscilla, my daughter.
For the legacy groups, do you have to, is there a way to, because I remember you guys saying like you meet every week, and I remember just you guys meeting every week. Is there a specific way to join the group? Can anyone join the group? Do they have to have a song to join the group, or?
It's a good question. Yeah, so with this particular group, she was asking if anybody could join the group, or if it's you know, kind of like a community group. And we're working on a larger community group, and that's where in the future I will need songwriters to help. And this is something that is already kind of pushing my capacity, and I've got wonderful friends that have offered their services, and I can't wait to make this a little more structured with different chapters. And, you know, we've got the VA in La Jolla right now, but we've got a hospice in Nashville coming up and later this year that wants to start, and so, you know, who knows where else. You know, it's kind of like lighting the torch. But I do want to do a community group that's more accessible for non-veterans. Right now, the VA program is strictly veterans or relatives of veterans. But yeah, everybody needs this, right? Yeah, but I'll keep everybody posted on that, because that's the year's goal, is to make it open, totally open. And so with that, we are out of time. Thank you guys so much, and I encourage you to explore this in your own regard. I'm sure you guys are already in so many ways, but you know, just a little glimpse into other elements of what that could look like. I invite you guys, if you'd like to get a little glimpse of the work, you know, my music's on Spotify, and I have an album that's recordings of the hospice patients I sat with, and it's their actual interviews. And then there's songs that follow. Those albums are called Star and Eyes to See the Wind. And there's some pretty profound words spoken in those interviews, so enjoy. If you got a long flight home, it's a good little podcast kind of thing. But thank you guys very much. Have a wonderful